world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Monday, the 13th of July, year of our Lord 2026. Well, we have a gerontocracy of politicians. Maybe that's what the GOP stands for. Well, no, they got very old politicians in the Democrats as well. We had Dianne Feinstein, we had Joe Biden, people who will not leave until they're carried out feet first. Well, we had another person pass away who was not all that old. Lindsey Graham, he was running for re-election at 71, still died suddenly. And already you have some of the grifting influencers out there saying, oh, he was murdered. Well, let me tell you, he plotted to murder so many people in his lifetime. We're going to talk about his career in retrospect, folks, and it will not be a eulogy. So if you don't want to hear it, be warned right now. And of course, we got Big Pharma and the pediatricians perhaps have jumped the shark in terms of coming after someone who pointed out that they're operating as RICO, racketeering and corrupt organizations. That's exactly what they are. And another person killed by ICE as federal policing ramps up and the Bill of Rights is throttled down. We'll be right back. Well, over the weekend, we had not just Lindsey Graham, everybody's paying attention to that, but we had somebody who I really respected, died, John Rappaport. He worked all of his life to help people, to save lives and help people, just like Lindsey Graham worked all of his life to kill people, to start wars, to create coups, to harm people. One of the worst politicians we've ever seen in America. But John Rappaport, on the other hand, John Rappaport was always at the forefront of questioning the official narrative, doing what a journalist should do. His website was No More Fake News. He did real research. As a matter of fact, I remember having John Rappaport on, I guess it was maybe just before Trump declared his emergency on that fateful Friday the 13th of March 2020. And John Rappaport was talking about, they had done the research and had talked about how Italy, that had taken the narrative lead over the pandemic, and of course it was as fake as it could be. We all knew that it was fake. But even in Italy, later on, you had a politician who angrily stood up and he's throwing all these papers. Look at this redaction and everything. This is a crime. This is, we've been had with all this stuff. I thought something was going to happen in Italy eventually, but no, it didn't happen. But before Trump locked us down, immediately before, Italy released 2 weeks worth of data. That data showed that the average death of people who had died, that it was attributed to this new plague, were past life expectancy. And they typically had 2.5 comorbidities. There were no young people dying. None of this stuff was happening. Remember, that was the narrative at first. We got to save the old people, when in reality, isn't it interesting how the government always gives you a narrative that's exactly the opposite? In reality, they wanted to kill the old people so they didn't have to pay Social Security. But that is, it was John Rappaport who brought that out, and I had him on many times during 2020. And he was fearless, and he would defend what he had to say, and could defend it because he did his research. As far as Lindsey Graham goes, the imprecatory Psalms, I think, come to play here. As a lion eager to tear his prey, lurking in secret places, deliver my life from the wicked men who have their portion in this life. I will be satisfied when I wake in your likeness. That, I think, is the legacy of Lindsey Graham. Someone lurking in secret places. A war whisperer, as he was eulogized in a Jerusalem paper. Well, who's going to be the voice for Israel in Trump's ear now, right? He's like Grimer Wormtongue out of Lord of the Rings. This vile creature, traitorous to his own people, pushing war, intrigue, coups. And don't forget that we look at the two places right now where war is plaguing us and where we are on the cusp of World War III in Ukraine. That was begun by Lindsey Graham and John McCain, both who are in God's presence right now. They started wars, they started coups, they were at the epicenter of this. They were pushing this far before Putin invaded. As a matter of fact, John McCain died 3.5 years before Putin invaded, and yet he had been to Ukraine over and over and over again. It wasn't just the Obama Democrats. It was John McCain and Lindsey Graham. They were in Ukraine, and they were stoking the revolution that was there, stoking the coup that was there. Let me play some of the clips for you from Lindsey Graham. Part of the rationale when he was in Ukraine, he was interviewed by mainstream media, and he said, yeah, this all began with Benghazi. And they said, how did that begin with Benghazi? And so he gives examples because in his world, you have to rule by power and fear and intimidation. You must not show any weakness or lose face. Does that sound like somebody else that we know?
It's just not about the Ukraine, about our standing in the world. You know, whether you agree that Snowden's a hero or a traitor, when our president tells the Russians don't give him asylum, there'll be consequences, and nothing happens that hurts us.
You know, this is a guy who says, I'm not with you, I'm with Israel. Israel, right? That's the way he pronounced it. I'm with Israel. He's the traitor. Snowden was trying to warn the American people what the American government was doing to them in violation of the Constitution. Unwarranted searches. And so going back to 2016, as I said, John McCain died 3.5 years before Putin invaded. But listen to what John McCain and Lindsey Graham were doing in Ukraine back in 2016. Remember, the revolution and the coup was in 2014. And then in 2016,
І я, як президент, і як Верховний Головнокомандувач, хочу подякувати кожного з вас.
I admire the fact that you will fight for your homeland.
Я захоплююсь тим, що ви боретеся за свою
They weren't attacked at this point.
Your fight is our fight.
Ваша боротьба – це наша боротьба.
2017 will be the year of offense.
Рік 2017 ріком нападу.
Next year,
All of
go on
us
offense.
will go back to Washington and we will push the case against Russia.
Ми всі повернемо.
You will be our cannon fodder. Most of these people are probably dead.
Відстоювати санкції проти Росії.
Enough of a Russian aggression.
Досить же.
Russian aggression had not
It
happened
is
for
time
another
for them to pay a
6
heavier
years.
price.
Час вже щоб вони заплатили важчу ціну.
Our fight is not with the Russian people, but with Putin.
Ми боремося не з
Got to get Putin. See, this is what it's about.
Our promise to you is to take your cause to Washington.
I believe you will win. I am convinced you will win, and we will.
The war had already started.
Can
They started
provide
it.
you with what you need.
Those two.
And we have succeeded, not because of equipment, but because of your courage.
Yeah, right. And your blood.
Не через
Now
обладнання,
go and die.
але через вашу відважність.
So I thank you, and the world is watching. And the world is watching because we cannot allow Vladimir Putin to succeed here. Because if he succeeds here, he will succeed in other countries.
And we cannot allow people like Lindsey Graham and John McCain to succeed in their wars. Their wars live on without them. They started killing people. Now people are still dying. It is their ego politics, their geopolitics that is doing this. We can't show that we're weak. Let's go after Putin. And again, to recall this, you remember that the coup was done by the American government, and they did it to come after Russia, as they're admitting right there. Next year we go on offense. They had already gone on offense. What he wanted was next year, let's invade. And when you look at what happened immediately after the coup, of course, you had some areas that did not like the new government that was installed by the American government. They were culturally and linguistically Russian and had been for a very long time in Crimea. And I remember when the war began, the British defense minister said, we beat the Russians in Crimea centuries ago, we'll beat them again. And it's like, You just admitted that that's Russian territory that's there. It has been for 400 years. Before, just prior to this, it was in the 90s that Ukraine was released and got its independence. But prior to that, for about 400 years, it had been under Russian control. And so they wanted to start this war of aggression with Russia when the people who were culturally and linguistically Russian said we want to secede. And I mentioned that at the time. I said, I'm always for the right of self-government, the right of secession. That means that you have a government of the people, by the people, for the people. They determine what the government should be. Because the government doesn't own us. We are not subjects of the government. We are citizens of the government. If the government becomes destructive of our rights that are given to us by God, then it is our right and duty to alter or to abolish or to peacefully leave that government. That was the Declaration of Independence. What happened in our first fourth turning after the creation of America completely undid that. Said, no, you are subjects. We own you. You will not leave. As I've said many times, you could say that it ended private slavery. That wasn't really the intention, I don't believe. But what it did do was it created slavery of everybody. I own you. You are my chattel property, and you will not leave. And so getting back to Ukraine, this was something that was always Russian. And what the newly installed American-backed Ukrainian government did was to shell for 8 years before Putin invaded. They shelled the civilians in those areas. As a matter of fact, in 2019, after this had gone on for 5 years, Zelensky was the peace candidate. He was supposed to end all this. That was his campaign. I'm going to stop this civil war that is being conducted unilaterally by the government in Kiev. Well, again, their involvement, just look at this. This is John McCain speaking at a big rally as part of the coup.
People of Ukraine, this is your moment.
Народи український, це ваш момент.
This is about you, no one else.
No, it's not.
Про вас.
It's about your geopolitics and Putin.
You want for your country. This is about the future you deserve.
A war and death.
Ваше майбутнє, про майбутнє вашої країни. Це про майбутнє, на яке
War and death brought by McCain and Lindsey Graham.
In Europe.
Майбутнє Європи.
A future of peace.
Майбутнє миру.
With all of your neighbors.
Майбутнє всіх ваших сусідів.
The free world is with you. America is with you. I am with you. And the destiny you seek lies in Europe.
І ваша доля.
Yeah, World War III, beginning in Europe.
В об'єднаній Європі.
Ukraine will make Europe better, and Europe will make Ukraine better.
Pushing NATO involvement. And of course, up until the day he died, Lindsey Graham was carrying on that legacy of his senior partner, John McCain. John McCain died, and Lindsey Graham, who had always been his little lapdog, continued his legacy of death, war, coups.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
There he is with Zelensky. A couple other people there. This is the meeting they had just before he came back and then died when he got back to the U.S.
Yeah, got a little update for you here.
Yeah.
Just tell me when I can talk. But good visit with the president, right?
Yeah, I think that we had really a good meeting.
Yeah,
the mood
so
was
too,
good,
yeah.
and we had some very important results. And I think that the decision of President Trump about licenses, positive signals about Patriot licenses, very important.
Yeah. Constantly, like I said, this little war whisperer, this little Grimer worm-tongue, constantly weaseling himself in behind the scenes to push war. Not being a spokesperson for peace, not trying to tamp things down, always probing and provoking and trying to provoke war.
In. I go back to South Carolina. I'm asking them to send their sons and daughters over to the Mideast. What I want you to do in the Mideast, to our friends in Saudi Arabia and other places, step forward and say, this is my fight too. I join America. I'm publicly involved in bringing this regime down. If you don't, you're making a great mistake, and you're going to cut off the ability to have a better relationship with the United States. I say this as a friend.
You know, it might be believable to start with if you didn't push every single war. Never saw a war he didn't like. Never saw a war he didn't want to escalate.
So I just want to say I feel good about the Republican Party. I feel good about where we're going as a nation. We're killing all the right people and we're cutting your taxes.
Are you killing all the right people? You sure
Trump
about that?
Trump is my favorite president. We've run out of bombs. We didn't run out of bombs in World War II.
He loves that, right? Let's just bomb everybody. Remember John McCain when he was running for president? Bomb, 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 bomb Iran, right? Instead of Barbara Ann or the Beach Boys. Yeah, we've run out of bombs. Well, now what do we do? Let's ramp up and spend some more money for my sponsors, military-industrial complex. Are we killing all the right people? Does he even care who the right people are? Listen to this.
When you look at the last few years since October 7th, many people in this part of the world say what happened in Gaza does not align with Christian values. Killing children, killing mothers,
I'll be honest
killing
with
families
you.
who are not militants.
Yeah, I don't buy that at all.
Why?
Because what did
He
we
doesn't care
do in
about
World
Christian
War II? Did we think 1 minute about starving the Germans? Did we bomb every city into smithereens? So this is a war. No,
October 7th to World War II.
Yes, I am. This is an absolute existential threat to the Jewish people. What happened on October 7th
nasty he is.
was 1,200 people were slaughtered, raped, and murdered and filmed by radical Islamists who would kill every Jew if they could, to the world. If you don't understand this is a threat to Israel's
survival. And then
survival,
they flattened Gaza.
Just flatten it. We flattened Berlin. We flattened Tokyo. Were we wrong to drop an atomic bomb to end the Japanese reign of terror? Were we?
Yes. Yes.
So my view, if I were Israel, I would have probably done it the same way. Without military victory, there is no hope of breaking radicalism. We flattened Germany. We flattened Japan.
How many Americans
Wait a
believe
minute.
this?
Out of that, we
the way that how many Americans think the way that you do?
I think most Republicans think the way I do.
Even young ones.
You're just out of touch if you don't understand Republicans, when it comes to radical Islam, is on Israel's side. It's not even close.
Israel. Well, yes, and I said it was unjust. And I say that because the way it is always sold is to say, well, we ended the war early, so we didn't have soldiers, Marines dying, going island to island like they did at Iwo Jima. There were thousands of people killed in Iwo Jima. Did Lindsey Graham care about that? He was saying, we took Iwo Jima, we can do that with Karg Island as well. Let's go kill the Marines. He doesn't care about American life any more than he cares about foreign life. He just wants to kill people in wars. And so when you look at it, as I said before, look, if this is a way to end the war early, why didn't you drop nuclear bombs on the islands that the Japanese soldiers were fighting on? Limit it to combatants. That's what a just war is. That's what the Christian principle is, not bombing civilian populations. The war in Dresden, the bombing in Dresden, was a war crime. As a matter of fact, no less than the war criminal who was running Vietnam was Robert McNamara. Robert McNamara said that on that documentary, The Fog of War. And Errol Morris got him monologuing, and I think part of it was he admitted that the Gulf of Tonkin was a false flag, and he admitted that they didn't know what was going on geopolitically. He said after the war, decades after, so we went back and we met with the North Vietnamese who are now running all of Vietnam. And he said the guy banged his fist on the table and says, "What's the matter with you Americans? Don't you know anything about history?" It's like, well, actually, no. We don't know anything about history. We don't know anything about the conflicts that we get ourselves entangled in. He said, for 1,000 years, we've been fighting the Chinese, and you wanted to say that this was a domino theory? That we were Chinese agents? Yes, the Chinese would help them because, again, of the geopolitics aspect. But they had no clue about that. And so as part of that documentary where he was talking to Robert McNamara, Robert McNamara said, hey, if we'd lost World War II, the American government people would have been tried as war criminals for what they did to Dresden. And it wasn't just that. Again, as I've said over and over again, this whole idea of bombing civilian populations, that began in World War II. And now civilian populations are fair game to people like Lindsey Graham and to most Americans who've been taught the wrong things and have not been taught Christian principles in the government's schools, and they never will be. You can put the 10 Commandments up there, but they're not going to put thou shalt not kill and steal in the context of our current wars. They will never do that. And so, so he says, oh, it was horrible. They had all these people who were killed. Were all those people killed by the Hamas people who came across? Or were they killed by the Israelis? The information has come out that the Israelis destroyed. As a matter of fact, had former prime minister who was high-ranking in the defense. I've played for you the clip in the past where he says, there were like 20 people in this building and we just completely destroyed it. They were all Israeli. We got our bigger plans, just like Lindsey Graham. These kinds of warmongers, these kind of mass murderers for political power will kill you. They will kill their own citizens. They will send your sons and daughters to go die for their game of Monopoly. That's what they will do.
For months, mainstream media broadcasted horrifying images of this highway you're looking at right now, leading away from the Nova Music Festival, where the attacks first started. We saw rows upon rows upon rows of cars, not just burned, but completely incinerated. In fact, many of those cars were melted. The media line was instantaneous. Hamas did this. Hamas torched these cars. This was a major part of the claim as to why extreme brutality was justified in Gaza. The Hamas fighters who crossed the border came on motorcycles and pickup trucks carrying AK-47s and light rocket-propelled grenades. An AK-47 fires small lead bullets. It cannot vaporize a row of sedans. It cannot melt engine blocks. It does not possess the capability to turn an entire highway into a graveyard of melted steel. You know what can do that, though? Hellfire missiles, autocannons, the type of heavy weapons deployed by Israeli Apache helicopters. Again, I explained this in great detail 2 years ago, and the response was, that can't be true. Israel would not do this to its own people. And yet this new documentary footage confirms that the orders were caught on video. Let's also not forget the instances inside the multiple kibbutz communities where Israeli tanks shelled civilian homes full of hostages, killing Israelis inside to eliminate the Hamas fighters who were holding them. Why did it take the Israeli military 7 hours to launch a coordinated defense, but Apache helicopters were instantly greenlit to shell fleeing vehicles headed towards Gaza?
6 hours? I don't believe it. Israel's the size of New Jersey. When I took a helicopter ride from Jerusalem to the Gaza border, it's 45 minutes. Wow. 6 hours. Did somebody in the government say stand down? That is a legitimate, non-conspiracy question.
Some are openly questioning if he was targeted for asking those very questions. Now, obviously, there's no evidence he was killed over those questions, at least not yet. But what is confirmed, what is documented beyond a shadow of a doubt, is that multiple pieces of evidence are coming directly from the mouths of Israeli officials themselves. See, none of these secrets were meant for American eyes or for American ears. So how did we find out about it? Because on this show, we never stop asking the questions that most mainstream journalists avoid. We refuse to consume that spoon-fed information handed to us. And when the situation demands it, we get our hands dirty. We'll go directly to the source and we translate what is actually being said on the ground. Because when you do, you discover the staggering scope of what we have been systematically blindfolded from.
That's right. Great reporting there from Ben Swan. And when you look at Lindsey Graham, again, when we go back to it, when is it ever justified to kill civilians? Never. And that is regardless of what happened with this. And again, we now see that a large number of those casualties of Israelis were inflicted by their own government. Was that deliberate? Did they stand down for 6 hours and not offer any help? It beggars belief to think that this was organic and not deliberate. But apart from what happened at the beginning of that, when you watch what the Israeli government has done now for years in terms of targeting civilians, in terms of targeting children, snipers, shooting them, let's shoot them all on this particular body part. And so the doctors who see them coming in said, all the kids coming in today were shot, in the arm or shot on the left side or whatever. So they're just playing games with these kids and shooting them twice just to make sure they're dead. And so those types of atrocities, no matter what happened on October the 7th, those types of atrocities could never be justified morally. None of this can be justified morally, and there's many questions about the origin of this attack. Was it engineered? Was it a stand down from the very beginning? Nevertheless, Lindsey Graham is loved and remembered in Israel. As I said before, he's like a war whisperer, whispering in the ears of the president and others to try to weave his little plans of coup, war, and death. Here's an Israeli paper. This is Haaretz. Lindsey Graham's death leaves Israel without a clear voice in Trump's ear. He really was a little Grimer worm tongue, pushing war constantly. And Trump now sounds like Lindsey Graham, Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro, that ilk. That's exactly, they've been very successful. Lindsey Graham was nothing other than another Jonathan Pollard, a traitor to his own people. He's with Israel. Yeah, well, he's not with them now. So it's not just Lindsey Graham either. It's also Mike Huckabee, who is a traitor, who is un-American. Look at this. His tribute to Lindsey Graham. He said, still processing the death of Lindsey Graham, reflecting on his life of service to Satan, his great sense of humor, and his love of Israel and the Jewish people. He was here in Israel often, every 2 weeks, he said. He understood the importance of the U.S.-Israel partnership. He will be sorely missed. Is there anything in that talking about Lindsey Graham's love of America, of his service to America? He should be remembered as Lindsey Goyam. That's what he should be remembered as. That's his real name, not Graham, Goyam. And so, again, I'm with Israel, will be till the day I die. And that came faster than he thought. And it's all coming for each and every one of us. As a matter of fact, one professor put this up, this meme. He shows Lindsey Graham. One of his last acts was to go to an Ukrainian drone factory, and he loved it, these instruments of death. He says, this is Professor Zinkas, he said, life is strange. 1 minute you're smiling and holding a weapon designed to tear human bodies apart. The next day you're laying on a slab in temperature-controlled room while half the world dances in celebration. Yeah, that's Lindsey's life in a nutshell right there. So he was with Israel till his dying day, and he wanted you to send your sons and daughters so they could go die. And that was that statement about, I'll be with Israel till my dying day. That was 4 months before his death. Wall Street Journal reports Graham went to Israel several times recently to coach Netanyahu on how to push Trump to start a war with Iran. Again, this is what you tell this guy. I know this guy. This is what you're going to have to tell him. This is how you manipulate him. This is why I say he's a war whisperer, this Grimer worm tongue. He tells Netanyahu, I know Trump. I've wormed my way in with Trump, and here's exactly how you need to approach it. And so they did. Netanyahu, and they had a teleconference with the head of Mossad. They gave all the war pitch to Trump, presumably just the way that Lindsey Graham wanted it before the Iran war kicked off. When the CIA looked at it, Daniel Radcliffe came back and he said, what Israel is telling you is based, what did he say? It was a fable, something like that. It was, he says, just absurd. Yeah, opposing war, folks, is not racism. It's not anti-Semitism. And yet Graham said, well, I'm not with them anti-Semites or these isolationists. And so, if you are somebody who opposes war, be ready to be attacked by the warmongers, because that's what warmongers do. Is Trump isolationist? No. Well, actually, according to them, he's not. But I think in reality he is. Look at what Trump has done. He's tried to isolate us from every single country. He's alienated Canada, Greenland, Denmark, that owns Greenland. He has thrown conflicts out with tariffs, in the form of tariffs, with pretty much every country, even with countries that are our allies, even with countries that we have a trade surplus with. He's gone to war with them. Because understand that when we do sanctions, sanctions are an act of war. An economic sanction today, and tariffs are really like economic sanctions, especially the way that Trump did it. Trump did not enact tariffs to fund the government. That was possible in the early 1800s. The government was small enough that Jefferson said, I've eliminated all internal taxes so that no farmer, no laborer, no mechanic knows the tax man. The government was funded simply by taxes at the border. And yet the government continued to grow to the point where that was no longer able to fully fund it. By the time we got to the late 1800s, they were using tariffs to benefit certain industries. And so you had this form of crony capitalism, corruption, I call that, or central planning, whatever you want to call it. But that was the way tariffs were used in the 1800s. Trump thought that was great. He thought that was the basis of our prosperity in the 1800s. No, it was a lack of regulation that was the basis of our prosperity. Taxes don't make you great. Nobody thinks that except Democrats. And Trump is a Democrat, always was a Democrat, a New York City Democrat. He thinks that taxes build wealth. No, they confiscate wealth. And so when you talk about enacting sanctions on another country, that is an act of war. It's like a siege. In the old days, they'd have city-states and they'd have castle walls and that type of thing. So what would happen is the invading army would surround them and put them under siege. And that is, in a sense, what sanctions are. That's why sanctions are prelude to war. So Trump has brought war in the form of tariffs, in the form of verbal insults and threats to everyone. People who are our customers, people who are our allies. He's done it to everyone. Graham has done a great job with him. And it's not all Graham, it's also Trump and the way he thinks. As I pointed out last week, the interview that he did, and I think it was in 1990, with Playboy, it was right after the Tiananmen Square incident. And he was boasting about how smart and how necessary the murder of hundreds of thousands of people, the Chinese military against its own people, against its own civilians, how justified that was. So don't talk to me about October the 7th. You support Tiananmen Square. Don't talk to me about governments. And of course, when governments kill their own people, that's fine, according to Trump. And you should think about that as he's building his surveillance network and his network of federal police wearing masks in unarmed cars who are coached on how they have a right to shoot first, and they'll never be held accountable for it. That's Trump's America. That's what MAGA wants. So frightening as Graham's comments to Hannity were, more disturbing is what the Wall Street Journal disclosed about his junkets to Israel. And this is from the New American at the time that Lindsey Graham said, I'm with Israel, not with America, right? Betting on Trump's second term, he said, was worth it for the president's military interventions alone. This is the bloodthirstiness of this warmongering, war criminal, Lindsey Graham. He said second-term Trump has different instincts than first-term Trump. I would say he stinks even more than first-term Trump. Even more corrupt, more supine to his donors and bribers. Lindsey Graham said, other Republican presidents wouldn't have green-lighted the Iran operation either, he said. Something he keeps reminding Trump of. I got to keep reminding this guy. I just love these wars. Let's kill more people. Come on, let's do it. Good riddance. Graham said that Trump was puffed up, I guess. He didn't say puffed up, but he was feeling his power after Venezuela. This is the time to move, right? get in touch with Netanyahu. You know that war you've been wanting to have with Iran for 35 years? It's always just 2 weeks away from that nuclear weapon. Well, right now, Trump's ready. You can pull the trigger on this thing because he thinks he runs the world and can do anything he wants without any question of failure. So speaking in Israel earlier this year, Graham said he visits Israel bi-weekly. Again, another traitor to America, just like Mike Huckabee and just like Donald Trump. Graham told the Republican Jewish coalition in November, "We're killing all the right people." Yeah, that's right. That's why I played for you. Well, now he can tell it to God. Yeah, I killed all the right people. During his interview, says the New American, with fellow chicken hawk Hannity, a booster of wars in which he is never and will never fight, Graham declared that the fight against Iran is a fight against Adolf Hitler. And again, that's you always see this out. My regret is that Lindsey didn't live long enough to be thrown out by the voters of South Carolina, if that were possible. I don't know if that is. I mean, when you look at the elections that we have now, we'll talk about this a little bit with what's going on with Mitch McConnell. We have a government of political parties, by political parties, and for the benefit of political parties. They have rigged the election in every way imaginable, and many ways that you can't imagine. We're not just talking about electronic voting machines or the corruption that is made possible with a vote by mail. The corruption that is possible with these electronic voting machines is just legendary and so obvious. And I talked about this a decade ago. You find software when you look at it that keeps the votes in terms of not in integers, but in terms of fractions, right? So it's a floating point number rather than an integer number. Why would you even bother to do that? As a programmer, you would typically, and I'm talking about old style programming, I'm not talking about vibe coding that you do with AI or whatever. This was put in by people, deliberately by people. And back in the day when we program, one of the first things you would do is pay careful attention to the types of variables that you're going to use to help to prevent errors. So if you're going to be counting votes, there's absolutely no circumstances in which a vote could ever be fractional unless you're going to go in after the fact and you're going to apply a percentage ratio to these things. Then you can have a floating point number like that and then round it off and report it as an integer. I mean, there were just so many things we covered back in the day. The fact that they kept the ballots electronically, and in Texas, you had the GOP Commissioner of Elections, I forget the official title, and he was head of the Board of Elections, and he was somebody who had been a Democrat, and he had worked at the Rose Law Firm with Hillary Clinton, and then he was brought in by, I think it was a Republican governor for sure. I think it was Rick Perry, and put in as the Commissioner of Elections or whatever the official title is. And when I went to interview him, he saw the microphone and where I was coming from, and he turned around and said, "No, not doing this one," and ran back up the stairs literally as we were yelling at him and filming him. He did not want to talk about any of that stuff. But the elections are so corrupt. And the most obvious stuff is the gerrymandering that is happening. They pick the voters. They pick the candidates. And if you are not picked by the political party, forget it. You're not going to get on the ballot as an independent or as a third-party candidate. They have shut those avenues off. If you go through the task of Sisyphus, and if you roll that rock up the hill and get on the ballot and spend most of your resources and time doing that, they still won't allow you in the debates. The elections are so rigged, and Lindsey Graham is exhibit A of that kind of a corrupt system. That's what you get when you have the political parties running the election system. You have people like Lindsey Graham. And so this is the how we get people like Lindsey Graham. He is one of a triumvirate of Republicans, people like Ted Cruz and Mike Huckabee, whose principal loyalty is to Israel, based on a unfortunate interpretation of the Bible, says the New American. I would call it a heretical interpretation of the Bible. They have replaced Christ with Zionism. They've replaced Christ with a political entity. They've replaced the prophecies about Christ and his kingdom, which is not of this world, with pointing to a geopolitical kingdom that is of this world. Yes, Lance?
I was going to say it's kind of the opposite of an unfortunate interpretation. It's a very convenient interpretation for them. Yeah. It's an interpretation that follows all of their political desires.
That's right.
Without any consideration.
So convenient, it checks all the boxes of the Zionists. You have to look at this and say, well, where did this theology come from and who promoted it? And we know.
Yes, it is kind of hilarious that they would report it as inconvenient.
That's right. So as Ted Cruz comes out and says, we are commanded to support Israel. That's a heavy no. And we're told that those who bless Israel will be blessed. No, they replace not just Christ with the nation of Israel, they replace Abraham with the nation of Israel. That was a different, we have a unfortunate circumstance in American, in English, not just American, but in English language now, where there is no distinction between you, a person, and a collective you, right? Well, the you that was there for a person, you can still see in the King James. That is, English used to have that distinction like most other languages. And so it said, I will bless those who bless thee. That was for Abraham, not for a nation. And so they replaced both Abraham and the Lord Jesus Christ with a corrupt, warmongering, murdering government that kills people for land. If America pulls the plug on Israel, God will pull the plug on us, said Lindsey Graham. Well, God has pulled the plug on Lindsey, and we can thank God that he did. Netanyahu fondly remembers how Lindsey Graham was always demanding more U.S. aid for Israel. Netanyahu says, I said, Lindsey, we don't need any more. We don't have any place to put all this money, right? And Lindsey said he would tell me, no, I'm going to go over your head to the Senate because I think you need more. Yeah, Americans don't need more money. The Israeli war machine needs more money. And so Israel has lost one of its greatest friends, Lindsey Graham. Lindsey was a true defender of freedom and the values that make our world safer, said Zelensky. Didn't make Ukraine safer. It's got us on the cusp of World War III. No, this is a kind of, again, it's the people like Netanyahu and Zelensky who love Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham, as I played for you at the beginning here, Lindsey Graham and John McCain going there to start the coup. Lindsey Graham and John McCain pushing the war. Lindsey Graham and John McCain going in 2016 and said, next year we're going to take this into Russia. We're going to take the fight to Russia. We're going to go get Putin. And after 6 years of that kind of rhetoric from Lindsey Graham, Putin attacked Ukraine. I can't really blame him, can you? It's just insane. It's Lindsey Graham, not Vladimir Putin, who is responsible chiefly for the Ukrainian war. Senator Claire McCaskill was shocked at Lindsey Graham's sudden death. She notes how he wasn't particularly old by Senate standards, quote unquote. That's right. Geriatrics on parade, the GOP. She said, when I think of Lindsey, I think of somebody who had every intention of staying in the Senate for his entire life.
Well, he did.
Yeah, he did. That's right. They carried him out feet first. Not going to leave till I die. I'm with Israel and I'm with the Senate. And we're killing all the right people. Yeah. History will remember Lindsey Graham sucked up to Trump. Nothing else will be remembered about him, says Ross Story. This is the take of the left. When the left looks at the life of Lindsey Graham, they condemn him for his friendship and his support of Trump. They don't condemn him for his support of endless wars, for his support of coups, for trying to push us into World War III. This is not even on the radar of the left. This is the problem with the hating Trump so much as a person. You should despise his policies. You should despise what he has done, and you should call him out on it. And as reprehensible as he is as a person, that should not be the focus of what. That's an easy target, but still, The left has become so personally focused on Trump, they can't see the consequences of what he's doing. They can't see the precedents of what he's doing. And they're not going to condemn Lindsey Graham for being a despicable warmonger and a Zionist. Instead, they'll just condemn him for being a friend of Trump. His career was defined less by what Graham built than by who he was willing to become in order to keep his job in the end. Again, he was an angel of death. That was his job. And I don't mean that in the sense, I mean, you could say he was a demon of death, but angel really is a job description. It means a messenger. Lindsey Graham was an angel of death. His message was always about death and about war, and unnecessarily about those, and glorying over killing civilians, just like Trump. Graham clung to his Senate seat like a sloth to a branch. You can say that about so many of them. When he ran for president and failed, Graham, among other things, called Trump a kook. He said nominating Trump would get the party destroyed. See, even Lindsey Graham can be right about something once in a while. But actually, what he wound up doing was using Trump to destroy the Middle East, to destroy Ukraine, and to destroy the global economy as part of this Iran war, and to take us to the brink of World War III. So that was Ross' story that was looking at him, condemning him because he was a chameleon, because he was a sloth, clinging to a branch to do whatever Donald Trump wanted. But the reality is that he was also pushing Trump, one of Trump's handlers. Lindsey Graham sacrificed his reputation to Donald Trump, says Vox, and he got plenty in return. So what reputation did he sacrifice? I mean, he was always known before Trump as a bloody killer and a warmonger. So I'm not really sure what these leftist takes are. I mean, they don't hate war. They hate Trump. Truly amazing to see the fact that they're taking this. Again, he visited Ukraine 10 times during the years of Russia's full-scale invasion and was here with our people when it was most needed, said Zelensky. But he's the reason that Russia invaded. He's out there saying, we're going to invade Russia next year in 2017. We're going to get Putin. Putin's the guy we got to get. We got to destroy him. So again, this is who started this war. Senator Tim Scott shared his condolences, saying South Carolina lost a statesman. When you look at the people coming from South Carolina, I got to say, the Republicans in South Carolina, if there's any conservatives in South Carolina, I know there are. There's a lot of people who live there who want limited government, who don't want foreign wars and foreign entanglements. And they need to get control of that Republican Party. The Democrats aren't going to give it to you. And what you're going to get from the Republican Party in South Carolina is people like Tim Scott and Lindsey Graham. So, again, when you look at what Huckabee says, talks about what a wonderful friend to Israel Lindsey Graham was. So the 2016 campaign and later, Graham was a vocal critic of Trump. Yet Graham became one of the president's closest allies in office, speaking with him frequently and becoming a regular presence on the golf course alongside Trump, because they're both owned by the same people, Israel. Foreign policy matters such as Iran and Russia, he advised the president on all those things. Again, what is the advice? War everywhere, war with everyone. War for any reason at all, or no reason at all. Either one of those will be fine with them. So what we're seeing on the, as I said, some of the people like Laura Loomer, Steve Watson, and others, Paul Watson, are jumping in on clickbait. I think it's really pathetic. When you talk about Lindsey Graham, why try to make a hero out of him, saying he was killed by Russia because he was there? You know, they bombed that drone factory where Lindsey Graham was in Ukraine. And then Lindsey Graham dies suddenly. Oh, well, that means that they're all connected. Well, you better believe that they bombed that drone factory if they know where it is. And he's boasting about it. But there's no evidence that Russia killed him. And quite frankly, Lindsey Graham would be fine if he could assassinate Putin. Right? This is just the way these guys fight their wars. So what difference would it make? Lindsey Graham should be condemned for what he did to the Ukrainian people, for what he wants to do to all of Europe, for the world war that he wanted to create. And it was a blessing from God that he's no longer with us, because he would keep pushing for that. And so it needs to be left at that. And I just think that it is pathetic to see how all these online influencers and gossipers are throwing out a bunch of insinuations without having any proof of anything. Just remember, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. They have nothing at all. Watson says, observers noted the coincidence with other high-profile Republican health incidents, including a recent 911 call for cardiac arrest with Mitch McConnell's home. And he hasn't been seen since. And this is Nick Sortor, who's also writing this. And these guys are saying Graham's passing, this is Paul Joseph Watson now, Graham's passing underscores the fragility of political life. Is all of life political? It is for these people. But the unanswered questions surrounding it highlight deeper issues of trust in these institutions. And again, people saying, well, I don't know. I think it's just too suspicious that he would die suddenly. Well, get a few more years behind you and you'll see that happening to a lot of your friends and family, especially with the jabs that Graham did not push back against. A libertarian talk show host, Clint Russell, told his nearly 300,000 followers, get your tinfoil ready, before he suggested without evidence that Russia was somehow to blame for Graham's death in Washington, D.C. This is how people get 300,000 followers. It's just disgusting. And if you take a principled stand on something, expect to lose hundreds of followers as a result. And expect to be shadow banned as well by the social media company. Graham is not just the most psychotic booster of Ukraine, but he was also the biggest booster for arming Ukraine a decade ago, and likely the Maidan Revolution, which really forced Russia to invade, said Clinton. Rather than condemning this, though, he says this could be the warning shot to the political class that while Russia doesn't want World War III, they will extract the cost to the politicians themselves who are pushing for this endless war. It's now being reported that he died of a heart attack. Sure, maybe. I don't know, said the guy. Think about that. Did he look like somebody that was in great shape? No. As a matter of fact, we've seen this story, unfortunately, over and over again. And so Laura Loomer also jumped in on that. And she said she decided to tell her 1.9 million followers, again, without any evidence, that it was possible that Russia had poisoned Graham with help from Iran. Oh, of course, right? Again, she takes it up to the next level. Maybe they killed him somehow. I don't know. Well, I think it was poison. Just ridiculous. Anthony Galli, a conservative writer with more than 10,000 followers, said Trump should launch Operation Lindsey Graham. It's what he would have wanted. Yeah, I think we should have some commemorative wars in his honor, right? If you just start World War III, Lindsey Graham would be smiling at us from hell. I guess that's really it. And then, of course, there's what's happening with Mitch McConnell.
Or else he'll never return, no, he'll never return, and his fate is still unlearned. Just like he may ride forever beneath the streets of Boston. He's the man who'll never return. He's the man who never return.
Yeah, will Mitch McConnell ever return?
He's the man who never return.
Evidently not. So it is kind of interesting that they kept this secret for so long. This was going for about it was a little over 3 weeks before anybody noticed anything about this. And then when people noticed it, the conservatives started lying big time. As a matter of fact, you have one article here. This is Crooks and Liars. I'm sorry, crooksandliars.com. The headline is CNN on the verge of firing Scott Jennings after his bogus McConnell claims. Jennings' account of a personal conversation with McConnell reflects his experience and not CNN reporting. Basically, what they're saying is, we don't believe a word of what this guy said. They were skeptical, as everybody was. And then we had this parade of GOP politicians and wannabe politicians, all of them talking to Mitch McConnell for a suspicious amount of time, 20 minutes. They all talked to him for 20 minutes. It's almost like they gave them talking points about talking to Mitch McConnell. Yeah, just tell Mitch you talked about 20 minutes. And so they all go out and do this. This is like that clip that we played so many times of Sinclair Broadcasting, where they give the script to all these local news broadcasters, and they're all reading exactly verbatim the same thing, and they go from one of them to another of them. We should do that.
It's very dangerous to our democracy.
That's right. We should do that with the 20-minute thing. If we could find clips of all these people saying it, but no. Anyway, they said he's the difference is that he's now blatantly lying instead of his usual casual lying. I guess this is the thing that I find the most interesting. We now have Republicans who are just like Bill Clinton. The blatant lies of Bill Clinton, I thought, were just astonishing when he was in office. But now the Republicans do this casually because of Trump and because of people like Scott Jennings and others. CNN said it does not consider Jennings' widely criticized claims about McConnell's health condition to be CNN reporting. He is among GOP insiders who claimed to have spoken to McConnell this last week. They said he is not a full-time employee or a journalist at CNN, and he does not represent the network. So maybe they will not be having him on as a lying commentator, blatantly lying to people or casually lying to people. On Thursday, he was again on with Jake Tapper, saying that he was told McConnell was preparing to get back to work. Jennings repeated his claims to Cassie Hunt on Friday, saying that he'd spoken to McConnell. Again, this is when you look at what these people are doing, they don't even try to come up with something that's plausible. They all just say 20 minutes. It turns out that Mitch McConnell was dead, if he's dead, in a coma, brain dead, or otherwise incommunicado on the day an analyst for CNN, Scott Jennings, claimed on national TV that McConnell was making calls and discussing issues of the day with colleagues. CNN must fire Jennings immediately, said Seth Abramson. And again, I'm not politically aligned with him, but I would agree with that. I mean, if you don't have any credibility, and this is what I told Alex Jones when they started pushing that nonsense from Steve Pieczenik about the sting so they could get the fundraiser of Stop the Steal going. They wanted to make a lot of money. They did make a lot of money, but I told them, I said, you burn your credibility. What have you got left? Well, I was wrong. You could just keep running and running and running. Credibility is not required anymore. But what I think is kind of, go ahead.
If I have proof that he's dead, this goes beyond Weekend at Bernie's into the full, Monty Python dead parrot skit. He's joined the choir invisible.
It's a dead parody skit. Well, they've got to keep this whole thing going for less time than they were able to keep it going at the very beginning. They just have to get to August the 3rd. Interesting thing is that Kentucky law was changed back in 2024. They knew that Mitch McConnell was in poor health. And you had Republicans pretty much controlled everything except the governorship. And they had a supermajority, veto-proof majority in the House and the Senate, so they changed the law. With Lindsey Graham, the South Carolina governor will appoint an interim senator, and they will have a special election. That will not happen in Kentucky because Republicans, and this is why I said we have a government of the political parties, by the political parties, for the political parties. They do not want the governor to have the power to appoint a successor because it's so hard to get people out of office. So they made sure they changed that law in 2024. So what happens is there will be a special election, but the special election must not be within 60 days of a regular election. That cutoff date is August the 3rd. So they saw this coming. And they made arrangements for this because the most important thing is the power of the party. This is what American government is now about. Bashir is calling on McConnell to end the crazy speculation a second time. And they said publicly, privately urged the last administration to address the public's concern with the former president's health. That would be Biden. He says, I'm now calling on McConnell to do the same and to provide voters an update on his own health. Again, they gave their first update in weeks on the senator's health, and it's now been 29 days since he was taken out, discovered unconscious after cardiac arrest, we were told. Interesting, there was a lot of speculation by Laura Loomer and other people saying, well, Elaine Chao fled to China when Mitch, had a cardiac arrest and presumably died. But the reality is that she had left a couple of days earlier. She had gone on June 12th. I imagine she did not come back because the Republican Party wanted to maintain this idea that there was nothing happening. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we will be right back. Stay with us.
In a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
And let's talk a little bit about what is happening in our lives, because this is a very important story for each and every one of us. It's a very important story if you have children or grandchildren to understand this. And this is why, and so much respect for John Rappaport. He went with this no matter how much he was attacked, how much he was ridiculed, and he took a lot of hits because the powers that be are really focused in a few different places. Big Pharma, Israel, and other things like that. If you go after those crime syndicates, they will come after you, and they have a lot of different ways to do it. The deeply troubling case of Andrea Shaw and her twins. This is from Brownstone Institute, and I reported this last week briefly. I think this is going to become a very famous case. I think this is going to get a lot of publicity. It already is starting to get a lot of publicity, and we'll talk about why that is happening. But I think also that the Big Pharma syndicate, the racketeering between Big Pharma and the pediatricians, I think that is going to be exposed by this trial here. Andrea Shaw, 23 years old, from Idaho, has been indicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder by suffocation in the deaths of her 18-month-old fraternal twins. She is in prison now and faces a life sentence or possible death penalty for murder. This is one of the most outrageous apparent cases of revenge that I have ever seen. And again, we haven't seen the government's evidence. All they've done is they've gotten an indictment from the grand jury. And you don't have to show that evidence, and you don't have to have any evidence, by the way. As we always say, a grand jury can indict a ham sandwich because you just have one side that is making the argument here. April 23rd of last year, the twins received 3 vaccines on the same day during a wellness visit. The mother had warned ahead of time that the father's family has a history of negative reactions to the flu shot. The very next day, the children developed diarrhea, lethargy, a low-grade fever, sunken eyes, and blue lips. She took them to the emergency room, and they were diagnosed with, quote, post-immunization reaction, unquote. They gave them Tylenol and some popsicles and sent them home. Well, the symptoms continued for the following days, improved slightly on April the 30th, but then the very next morning, she found the twins dead in their shared bed. The police investigated this as possible asphyxiation. In other words, murder. They stopped breathing because of what happens to the brain with the adjuvants and other issues like that. 3 days later, she and her husband appeared in a Children's Health Defense interview saying that the vaccines had caused the deaths. They described the timeline. They said the police had suggested asphyxiation and possible postpartum blackout during questioning. So what they're saying here, I guess, is that she has postpartum symptoms a year and a half later, and that she somehow blacked out and didn't know what she was doing, but she nevertheless, even though she wasn't aware of it, somehow suffocated the kids. And what Brownstone says is how a person strangles children while blacked out is not explained. So that was, the kids died in April. Then by January of this year, They became lead plaintiffs in a RICO lawsuit against the American Academy of Pediatrics, alleging vaccine harm. Because, folks, there's no question that the Pediatric Association is colluding with the vaccine industry and with the insurance industry to coerce pediatricians to vaccinate kids according to their schedule. It is very coercive, very corrupt. It should be reviewed as corrupt business practices, but it absolutely is racketeering and a corrupt organization. RICO certainly applies, even more so when you look at what has just happened. So they came after them in a RICO lawsuit because, of course, the vaccine maker cannot be sued, thanks to Fauci, thanks to Reagan, due to the 1986 vaccine protection against harming children. This is why I say, when we look at how they want to impose a digital ID on everybody in order to protect kids online, don't talk to me about that when you still have immunity for harm done to children from the vaccine industry. When you still look at what they're doing with them in schools, what they're doing to them with food, what they're doing to them with vaccines, don't talk to me about protecting kids. That rings so hollow. It's absurd. So this leaves a professional organization as the only people that they can come after because it's largely funded by the pharmaceutical companies. They are joined at the hip. And the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, functions as a pharmaceutical lobby, coercing pediatricians to vaccinate children in massive quantities that we don't see in any other country. You know, America is taking the lead in some very frightening areas, whether we're talking about war or the police state or the surveillance state or this kind of murder for profit. And again, it's this type of attitude. I don't really care what my product does to people. If I'm big enough, I can buy my way out of it in Washington. And that's true of big pests as well. You know, the glyphosate industry, which has bought their immunity from Trump. Not only that, but Trump then made them part of a defense program to help to subsidize them. Because what we have to do is we've got to have we've got to move a lot of product for big farm, for big ag, right? And just like with big pharma, they are vital to the finances of these politicians. And so they get whatever they want. And their goal is they want to push product. They don't care what it does to people. I want everybody to get vaccinated as many times as I can think of. I'll get you 4 or 5 times for each individual condition we can identify. And when you look at food, they want to pump this food out. They don't care what is in it. They don't care how it was contaminated during the growing process. They don't care how it's contaminated during the processing, the packaging, and so forth. Or if they've got chemicals that are used as lubricants or as anti-foaming agents or whatever, just leave them in there. We don't care. We got to pump out as much processed food as we can because that's how we make our money. And I don't care what it does to people. That's the ethics of American corporations now. So on June 29th this year, just recently, a grand jury in the county indicted Shaw on 2 counts of first-degree murder, alleging that she intentionally suffocated the twins based on a lower level of evidence than is required in a trial. Again, that's the way the grand juries operate. You don't have the ability to question your accusers or to have exculpatory evidence presented. You can indict a ham sandwich that way. On June 30th, she was arrested in Boise by the police. She had recently given birth and was breastfeeding a new child, and they took the child away from her, put her in jail on $2 million bond. This is why I say, when you talk about what criminal organizations the pediatricians are and the pharmaceutical industry, this is the kind of thing they're capable of doing. They kill children without remorse. They rip a mother away from her new child that she was feeding, put her in jail under $2 million of bail. Her attorney stated she denies the charges and the state cannot prove them. And so Brownstone says, well, so here's a complete court. We don't have anything. These are the court documents that were released, but there's nothing in that provides any evidence of murder. They said the evidence that we do have includes the fact of 3 shots each on one day, the resulting adverse reactions, the hospital's judgment that it was a vaccine injury, and the children dying 1 week later. Those are the facts that we know. There are no facts that have been released that would indicate that she did anything premeditated, that she killed the children. The case has garnered a level of press attention not usually associated with such a case. It has seen news coverage from the New York Times, from the Wall Street Journal, from the Washington Post, from CNN, from USA Today, from Epic News, ABC News, Independent in the UK, Newsweek, Gizmodo, Associated Press, and the Daily Beast, and more. Think about that. We have not seen typically when you have a quote-unquote murder trial that you would have this much attention. And so I think what is happening with this is it's a coordinated establishment move to try to punish her. And frankly, I think they've jumped the shark. All this attention suggests the pharma-backed media believes that it has an ace in the hole. The hope here is to humiliate the movement against child vaccines and the use case as paradigmatic of a anti-vax fanaticism that is used to cover a terrible crime. Yeah, there is a terrible crime. It's called sudden infant death syndrome, and they have come after innocent parents for decades. So the shaken baby syndrome, you broke the baby's neck by shaking it, or you kill the baby by shaking it. But as people pointed out, if that were true, you would have broken the baby's neck. That is one of the most vulnerable things about a baby. They can't support their head. And if you shook them enough to destroy their internal organs, you would have broken their neck. And so that is one aspect that they've put on this. They have arrested people because they said, well, you didn't position your child so that they weren't sleeping on their stomach or back. I don't know. We never paid attention to that because we didn't vaccinate our kids at an early age. The attention comes following the shocking removal, but not a retraction, but a full removal of a 2021 paper on sudden infant death syndrome that was in the journal Toxicology. The title of the paper is Vaccines and Sudden Infant Death, an analysis of the VAERS database from 1990 to 2019 and the review of the medical literature. The paper analyzed reports of infant death, including those labeled as SIDS, from the U.S. Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, the database, and they did it over a 30-year period. The writer of the paper reported a large percentage, 58% of the children, died within 3 days of being vaccinated. 75 to 78% died within 7 days, and the deaths occurred shortly after vaccination. He suggested that the temporal clustering indicated a possible causal link between the vaccines and SIDS, while also reviewing other literature and claiming infant deaths post-vaccination are often misclassified as SIDS. So where did this SIDS thing come from? Well, this never existed as a diagnosis until the vaccine industry got going. This is hardly the only such report. The research connecting SIDS with vaccination is extensive. It has been the topic of public controversy for many years, though it is dogmatically denied by mainstream science. Well, that'd be mainstream institutions, not science. They haven't done any science. They don't want to look at this. This truly is, folks, racketeering and corruption. RFK Jr. sent a letter to the journal in question, Toxicology, noting how unusual it was to completely remove this and not just to retract it. The notice of removal you issued had only 2 sentences explaining the retraction. Given the high levels of public interest in vaccine safety and a history of both overt and obscure pressure against the study of some of these topics, such a brief notice of removal is woefully insufficient, said RFK Jr. Well, this could be a huge landmark case. Regardless of what happens legally, it's going to get the public's attention in this. And there's going to be a lot of scrutiny on this. They think they've got a winning case. We shall see. As Brownstone continues, Big Pharma, they said, has clearly stepped up their campaign of covering up of smearing its critics, of censorship. And now, I guess, this is, instead of just doing censorship and deplatforming people and so forth, now they're going to put murder charges against people after they killed the kids, which is what I believe happened. We have seen this happening over and over again. And now, after the rushed Trump shot, the genetic code injection, the mRNA vaccines, we now see the sudden adult death syndrome, right? They're skewing scientific debate in a manner that makes its products appear to be safe and effective, while tolerating no evidence to the contrary. July 2025, for example, Brownstone Institute published a memo from the pharma lobby, BIO, with a detailed plan to subvert any attempt by RFK Jr. to hold the industry to account. What precisely is pharma covering up? And how bad is it? As I said before, when you look at people who focus on censorship, who focus on deplatforming, whether it's Big Pharma or whether it's the Zionists in Israel, they've got some crimes to cover up. That's the reality of it. The case of the jailed Andrea Shaw and her now dead twins is deeply troubling. All evidence we have points to another probable case of death by vaccine. Whatever coincidence there is that she killed them will be presented in trial, or not coincidence, whatever evidence that she killed them will be presented in trial. But right now, no evidence that she killed them has been presented. But we will also get discovery of all communications of whether and to what extent the American Academy of Pediatrics is involved. And so it bears watching these cases closely. So not only that RICO lawsuit that she initiated, but also the murder trial, which probably a big pharmaceutical company and the pediatricians initiated. Both of those are going to have discovery. I mean, we're going to have a lot of information coming out of this for quite some time. This is not the last time you'll be hearing about this. The reason pharma feels confident it can make an example out of her is because they control the entire knowledge production process. They would rather spend millions to convict Andrea Shaw as a lesson to others who might come forward than to risk losing a case showing that they are racketeering. So it may very well be that suspicions of police and prosecutors have merit. It may be that she will be found guilty by a jury of her peers. However, given what we have come to know about the sheer dishonesty and vindictiveness of Big Pharma and its many pay-to-play allies in the mainstream media, it would be irresponsible to not raise the possibility of a corporate-designed miscarriage of justice. In a word, framed. And so that bears watching. Meanwhile, we have the WHO issuing chilling warning that cancer cases are exploding globally. They've issued a chilling warning that cancer cases are increasing so rapidly, they believe the disease is soon expected to affect more than 90% of the global population. Just think about this. I went back and looked to see what their estimates were of the population that was affected by cancer prior to putting out the Trump shot, the genetic code injection, the mRNA. And prior to that, they had estimated about 20%, about 1 out of 5 men and about 1 out of every 6 women. So about 20% for men, 17% for women would have cancer. And then I looked to see what percentage globally of people got vaccinated with these genetic injections. That was about 70%. Now, we are not at 90% yet, but we're seeing cancers coming back and coming back with a vengeance. The turbo cancer that we were warned about. As a matter of fact, it was Dr. Ryan Cole, a pathologist, who in the spring of 2021, as they had already started vaccinating people in the hospitals at the end of 2020, he said, I'm looking at some people who are having health issues already, and he said, I'm seeing that the killer T cells are decimated in the people that have been vaccinated. So this is your body's primary defense against cancer. I expect to see cancer soaring, and that's what we're now seeing. So the agency estimates that if current trends continue, cancer will affect 92% of people worldwide by 2050. This is why I keep telling people about RNCstore.com. And of course, you can go there get G. Edward Griffin's book, A World Without Cancer. And you can also find some natural ingredients, B17, which can be found in apricot seeds. They focus on apricot seeds because even though B17 is found naturally in a lot of foods, its concentration is highest in the apricot seeds. Find out about that. Find out about ivermectin, fenbendazole, menbendazole, these antiparasitics that we are getting anecdotal evidence of amazing cures of people who have stage 4 cancer. This is something that is going to be affecting almost every family if they're correct. And I think we know where this is all coming from. And so this article from Slay News comes on and then offers vaccines as the healing, not as the source of these problems. Dozens of nations are working on personalized cancer vaccines. And remember, this is how Trump started off his second term. He had the Stargate project. He said, we're going to combine artificial intelligence with my mRNA vaccines, and we're going to custom tailor a cancer vaccine for each and every one of you. And it's like, yeah, just talk about a nightmare. We've talked for the longest time about these new technologies bringing us into a brave new world. The acronym is GRAIN: genetics, robotics, artificial intelligence, and nanotech. And they're already pushing together the genetics and the AI already. And they're doing it, as this Slay News points out, in multiple countries, not just the U.S. The UK, Cuba, China, Russia, all are developing cancer vaccines using the mRNA injections, which are responsible for the turbo cancer. They will give you exactly the thing that accelerates, and I can just hear the ads now on Fox News, the Ask Your Doctor stuff, because I've already heard it. Are you depressed? Are you feeling suicidal? Take our SSRI drugs. And then what does that do? That creates feelings of depression, suicide. It creates murder-suicide delusions. And we've seen that over and over again. Or you listen to something else, whatever it is that they're selling, as they've got kids, running through fields of flowers in slow motion. They'll rattle off at very fast speed the adverse effects. And usually one of the adverse effects is that it intensifies the very thing that you are taking it for. By 2050, the disease is expected to affect nearly the entire global population. It's our food. It's our drugs. So, this is just childish propaganda and fear-mongering as we look at this. Meanwhile, we have an article from John Fleetwood on Substack, DARPA's chilling pre-COVID blueprint to predict, to manufacture, and to deploy pandemics on demand. Now, we know that DARPA was involved for a long time in this mRNA technology. He found a project here called the Prophecy Project to predict the vaccines they're going to need in advance of the need and to build the systems intended to validate those predictions. What I'm surprised at is that nowhere in this article does he talk about Dark Winter or any of the 20-some-odd annual germ games that were run by the CIA, by DARPA, by Johns Hopkins, by Fauci, and the usual suspects that were at the heart of what they actually pulled off. And the last one was an exact replica of what they actually pulled off with the COVID thing, the Event 201. But they started all this stuff back 2 months before 9/11. It's all tied together. So DARPA itself described the vaccine-centric purpose of the program unambiguously. The Prophecy program will explore the evolution of viruses in the hopes of predicting viral mutations, ultimately developing drugs and vaccines in advance of need. Yeah, well, your smoking gun, I think, is still the simple simulations and that they ran for the longest time, the Dark Winter and other issues. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we'll be right back.
making sense common again. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
All right, welcome back. I'm Marty. Thank you very much, Marty. That's very generous. I appreciate that. He says, in appreciation of your years of honest news and insight. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And MRCC01, thank you for the gift subscriptions that you contributed to us on Kick. Pezzo Anvante 1776 said they did not call him Lockheed Lindsey for nothing. That's right. Audi MRR says, absolutely, the U.S. is sending 60,000 U.S. soldiers to Iran right now. Not all of them will come back, and the oligarchs couldn't care less. I agree. And, we just had a situation of somebody who was doing some work for us, and he was doing this on the side, and he's got a regular job, and so it was delayed because he had to do some extra work at his regular job, and he just contacted us and said, well, it's going to be a while now before I can finish that up because I've been called up. I'm in the National Guard. And it's like, man, when you look at this, send your sons and your daughters. And your daughters. Think about that. We didn't used to send our daughters off to die, but the Republicans will embrace feminism if it can kill more people. And that's exactly what they're doing at this point in time. The Syrian girl says, I've started praying that God will call these murderers to faith in Jesus and reform them so they could do good works. But if he knows that that is impossible, I pray he will remove them from power that can hurt us and his people around the world. I absolutely agree with that. That is the right way to pray. We should always pray for their salvation and their reform, but we should also pray to keep the czar far away from us. That's the line from Fiddler on the Roof. Is there a prayer for the czar? They asked the rabbi, and he says, yes, God bless and keep the czar far away from us. Star Barkley, there was a good article about what the autopsy revealed, an arterial dissension brought on by arterial sclerosis. How would the Russians cause that? Maybe the Fantastic Voyage, remember that? Where they shrunk the people into the ship and they shrunk it down and they go voyaging through the bloodstream. Yeah, that's why when you look at this, it's very, death can come very quickly for any and every one of us, right? That's why when I saw some of these ruminations about, the Russians killed him, I can't believe that somebody just dropped dead like that. It's like, and how old are you that you can't believe that? I've seen it happen, unfortunately, over and over again. Christ has said he's coming back like a thief in the night at the end of the world. But death can come for each and every one of us like a thief in the night. Many of us are living with the same kind of heart conditions like Lindsey Graham. I have an aneurysm. I mean, that could happen. That's what a dissection is. It's basically a tearing of the artery. And so it is, that is something that we all live with one way or the other. Big Brit is back again, said people keep dying suddenly or getting cancer, heart disease, and stroke. It's all skyrocketed after the Trump shots. That's absolutely right. But I've also known several people who died suddenly. I mean, when you look at people who have had spouses and family who died, Thomas Massey's wife died suddenly. He said no, she would never get the vaccine. She never got the vaccine. That happened to Karen's twin brother just a few months ago. He died suddenly. He had never been sick. He didn't get the vaccine. So that happens. Audi Modern Retro Radio. He says it's proven that canine dewormers cure cancer. Yeah, we have a lot of cases, and they just keep coming, of people who had stage 4, and it came right back on them. We're going to take a quick break at the bottom of the hour, folks, and we're going to be right back.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
In July of 1896, exactly 130 years ago, I warned this great nation of the government's plan to crucify mankind upon a cross of gold. Of course, that was before they started to bleed us dry with a death of 1,000 fiat paper cuts. But after you bought every single commemorative David Knight Show coin in gold color, the podcast's gold reserves are depleted. They issued 100 numbered gold-colored coins and declared the mint closed. The people cried out, "Free silver!" Well, the likes of J.P. Morgan can't stop this all-new commemorative coin. Now in silver color, while supplies last, this commemorative coin does not contain precious metal, but does keep the show on the air. Equal to the gold color, this limited run is numbered 1 to 100. Get yours today at thedavidknightshow.com. Hurry, because supplies are disappearing quicker than the purchasing power of the dollar.
Let's talk a little bit about the moral side of things. So we did talk about that a little bit with Lindsey Graham, but Democrat pastors are running to reclaim Jesus from Trump's Republicans. It doesn't belong to either one of them. Jesus is not a Republican or a Democrat. He is definitely independent.
Weird
He's
that
not
they
a candidate.
He's
He's
Tallarico on this.
What's that?
It's weird that they would put a picture of Tallarico on this.
Yeah, that's right.
Doesn't want anything to do with the God of the Bible.
Isn't that interesting? You know, and he had that quote. I don't know if we played that or not for you. He said, "I hate Christianity," he said, "but I keep getting drawn back into it." I guess that's the Democrat Party keeps drawing him back into it. You know,
I hate Christianity, but you guys keep buying whatever I sell you when I use this term, so I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, he is not selling Christianity, believe me. A band of white Democratic pastors has a striking message ahead of November's midterm elections. Republicans have hijacked Jesus for political gain, and we're not going to stand for it, they said. Except they don't even like Jesus. They don't want to invite Jesus in. The Christians that we're hearing in Washington don't reflect the Jesus of the Gospels, said one of them. Along with support for fiscal responsibility and a strong military, the 62-year-old Hamilton, who said that, backs legal access to abortion and protecting LGBTQ rights. And so, think about that. He wants a strong military so that he can not just, he backs abortion, and he wants a strong military, which in the American empire, the strong military is what pushes these wars. It's a military-industrial complex and this massive critical mass that we have created that is pushing and pushing and pushing all the time. So this is a guy who wants to abort not just babies, but children and adults. That's what wars do. And of course, then he also wants to protect Sodom rights, Sodom and Gomorrah America. So he cited the crassness and the mean-spiritedness of Trump's presidency. So it's okay to kill babies. It's okay to kill children and adults. And it's okay to engage in every kind of perversion that you can imagine that God wiped out entire cities for doing in the past and has warned us about that in the Bible. But be polite. By all means, be polite. Don't offend anybody, right? As you are killing babies and children and adults, don't offend anybody's feelings. Just start wars and push abortion. Democrats have a long tradition of clergy in politics, but always among African Americans. The last white Democrat pastor in Congress was Bob Edgar, a Methodist minister representing Pennsylvania from 1975 to 1987. No fewer than 7 white clergy or ministers in training representing the Democrat Party are vying for congressional seats. 3 of them are women who say that they're aiming to reclaim the Bible from Republicans. These are people who are pushing women pastors, LGBT, abortion, and wars. Perhaps the most prominent is James Tallarico, the 37-year-old nominal Presbyterian. Maybe that is what the Presbyterians represent now. I don't know. I would hate to I'd hate to compare anybody to Tallarico because it's such a pejorative insult. The Democrats have gradually shifted from being identified as a party of the working class to a secular elite where religion can be unfashionable. Oh, it absolutely is unfashionable for them. Co-chair of the Democrat National Committee, Interfaith Council, Indira Dugarala, acknowledged, she said, there's been a vacuum in that religious space in Democrat politics. So we need to have some people in there who are going to pay lip service to it, and say that it's okay to be a Democrat, and it's okay to be religious. Just don't go with what Jesus said. You use the label,
It's all back to the whole thing that they were saying about, these people are speaking impolitely, and therefore that's anti-Christian, and that's the ultimate thing to them, because it's only about what they're saying in their eyes. It has absolutely nothing to do with anything, because they only see Christianity as, a set of virtue signaling rules that they can adopt, and a way of speaking, essentially.
That's right. It's completely horizontal in its outlook. There's nothing vertical to Christ or to God. It's all about, well, how are other people going to perceive this? Is that hateful? And I need to get welfare to all these people out here who are suffering. We need to take care of their physical needs, and certainly we don't need to be going around throwing insults at people like Trump does, especially unnecessarily. And we should help other people, but that's not the work of government. That is the work of each and every one of us.
They're just using Christianity as another flavor of their virtue signaling.
So now Tallarico's got a new quote, because he can't hide, really, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, doesn't it? And so what he's now saying is he loves to learn about other religions like Islam. He suggests all religions are equal paths to the truth. This is one of the things that many people criticize Billy Graham for. Toward the end of his life, he went on with an interview, and they were both talking about a wideness in God's mercy, and I think everybody is going to be accepted by God. That is not what Jesus Christ said. Not at all. It's the opposite. He said, I am the way, the truth, and life. No one comes to the Father but by me. Does that leave any room for wiggling? No one is pretty definitive, I think. So he said, there's that divine mystery of the universe. We all have different names for that mystery of the universe, whether it is God or Yahweh or Allah or Nirvana or Great Spirit, whatever you want to call it. This is all different pathways to the same fundamental truth. Again, this is a guy who says he hates Christianity. Maybe he hates it because of its exclusivity. That is one of the things that really people hate about Christianity, is the fact that it claims, makes the exclusive claim of Christ. He's the one who made that claim. So don't call yourself a Christian if you don't accept that. James Tallarico said Islam and Christianity are equal pathways to the truth, said a Texas PAC that's there. And they quoted him on that and said, whether it's God or Yahweh or Allah. And look, understand that when they say Allahu Akbar, they're not saying that God is great. I've heard many people offer that explanation. And what they're saying is Allah is greater than your God. They don't believe they're the same God. Why should we believe that they are? This is all simply the leftist ethics of not offending anybody. Someone should ask James Tallarico how Islam feels about trans kids, because he said, he was asked in an interview, something that you love that is not from family or friends. And his reply was, trans children. Brandon Gill, the congressman, tweeted that out, and he said, that's just creepy. It is creepy. It is pedophilia. Absolutely. Democrats went looking for a nominal Christian candidate to run in Texas, and Tallarico is who they came up with. That's as good as they can do. They are as clueless about Christianity as Hollywood is. We were laughing about that the other night. They renewed House of David, and we were talking about that. It's like we put that on to watch it, and I didn't make it past the first 2 minutes, I think, because they began with the fight between David and Goliath. They weren't happy with the biblical narrative, so they had to change it to make it more dramatic. So Goliath is throwing these giant spears that are landing like mortars all around him. And then David gets speared. Absolutely not in the story at all. And as he's laying there with a spear in his side, he starts to flash back about, well, how did I get to this point? You know, that's just pure Hollywood embellishment. And that is not what religious people want to see. It's not what people who read the Bible want to see. It's not what Christians want to see at all. Well,
and to be clear, we didn't have any expectations of the House of David being any good. We wanted to see what level of a train wreck it was.
That's right. And it's like, that's enough. I'm not watching any more of this if they're going to play that fast and loose with it. So there's this Table Talk article here talking about how the church is the pillar of the truth. Yeah, it's not Islam. It's not Judaism, because Judaism is as anti-Christian a religion as you can find. They are against Christ. They are anti-Christ. That's why Christ himself called rabbinical Judaism the synagogue of Satan. So as Paul says, the church is the pillar and the buttress of the truth. Well, we are not the foundation of Christianity. The way to think of that is the fact that we are the preserver and the promoter of the truth, just as pillars and buttresses support the roof and the walls of a cathedral. So the church plays a vital role in upholding the truth of God within a fallen world. It's not our job to dress up the Word of God as if we could make it more palatable to people who are in rebellion. That is the mission of the Democrat Party, though. And that is the mission, unfortunately, of a lot of churches who, there was a big movement, it's called the seeker-friendly movement. We're going to dress up the Word of God to make it more palatable to people who are actually in rebellion to God. And we're all in rebellion to God to some degree or the other, right? When we look at it. We have the hearts of rebels in that, and that is our constant struggle. But we don't modify the truth. We uphold it, and we try to preserve it. We don't try to figure out how we can market it. You know what? At one point, when we worked so hard to get on the ballot, we wanted to make sure that we stayed on the ballot, and you had to, at that point in time, get 10% of the vote, or you'd have to start the whole process over again. And in our lawsuit after the election, we referred to it as the Sisyphus task. You know, that was the Greek legend where this guy was tasked with having to roll a boulder up the hill, and then he'd get up the hill and it'd constantly roll down, and he had to do it again. Well, that's what ballot access is like for independent parties. So we went around and we went to a guy who had a reputation for being an independent. He was, the Democrats had been in control of the state government with an occasional Republican governor. They've been in control of the state government since Reconstruction. And they were controlling it at that point in time, but there was a guy who had been there for a very long time, and he kind of held court. One of the guys the guy actually who wound up running for governor said when he was a page in the North Carolina Senate, I think the guy's name was Liston Ramsey, I think was the guy. He had been Speaker of the House for a long time. And he said, he would sit over in the corner of this cafeteria. He said people would line up, basically kissing the ring like he's the Godfather or something. And there was this one guy who pushed back against all that, and he got Liston Ramsey out of the speakership, and he became Speaker of the House himself, and he was defiantly independent. And so we went to him, and three of us, and we said, would you like to run for governor? What do you think about running for governor as a libertarian? And so he and his campaign guy who was there, the campaign guy, was his money man. And so he asked us a few things about what we believed, and we told him we were against the war on drugs, and he goes, well, I could probably have some fun with that. I could probably sell it on a limited basis. He didn't believe any of the things that we believed at all. He didn't believe in liberty or the Constitution, but he's looking at taking these policies one at a time. It's like, well, yeah, I think I could sell that with a little bit of fun and kind of, keep at arm's length with you guys and still push this thing through and kind of deflect the criticisms from that. And then it finally came to the point where, but I'm going to require X amount of dollars. And it's like, hey, we got zero budget, pal. This is not anything that we have. This is simply going to be, you're going to go out there with no campaign funds and you're going to try to make an argument, except he doesn't believe in any of the principles. And that's where we are right now with our politics. And that's where we are with the Christian community, so-called Christian community. They're going to go out there and do their best to try to entertain people with bread and circuses and not offend them with anything that Jesus said. So you've got in Rome, you've got nominal Catholics, and when LifeSite News, a Catholic site, reports that they put in Catholics, they put, quote unquote, Catholic members of an LGBT group marched in Rome's Pride Parade carrying, listen to this, a large rainbow-colored cross. They called it the Cross of the Covenant. Yeah, it's just wrong on so many different levels where do you even start with it. We walked as rainbow Christians, proud of the faith that we hold in our hearts and of every single color that speaks to the unique beauty of who we are. Well, you have identified yourself as the sin that you practice in rebellion to God. And of course, one of the key sins that God focuses on is pride. He punished that more with David than he punished adultery or murder. He punished his pride. That's why it always just amazes me when I see these different nominally Christian groups or whatever that call themselves followers of Christ or the Bible in some way, shape, or form, when they go out and they embrace pride. And of course, we had this politician in Finland, I think it was, that she had been a member of parliament several different times. She had been a cabinet minister. And when her church was going to do a pride parade, she and a pastor spoke out against it on social media. They quoted the Bible. And for that, a prosecutor came after her relentlessly. And she lost her third trial and is waiting appeal to the Supreme Court because she spoke out against what the Bible clearly calls sin and rebellion. And so they said in LifeSite News, they said, well, they seek to witness that neither God nor Scripture condemns people because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. Wrong. We want to support the civil rights that Italy still declares LGBT people, including marriage equality and equal parenthood rights and so forth. That's what they're marching for. And we march with our heads held high, unafraid to bear witness to love that excludes no one. Well, there is a love that excludes no one. That is the agape love of Christ, who offers to everyone forgiveness. But he also says that you will suffer the consequences of your sin. Maybe, different consequences. And of course, if you are a believer in Christ and you do not follow God, there are consequences in this life. I think in the next life as well. God chastens those who are his children. He disciplines those who are his children as a good parent. So don't put yourself into open rebellion against God, but these people are doing it. It's pretty amazing that they would take the symbol of Christ's paying for our sins and they would paint it with colors of their sins. I guess, and not to say that, that he's taken this away, but they want to keep that. I've seen people who, certain communities where they would go in and as they came to celebrate Resurrection Sunday, they would all write something, a piece of paper, something about their sins, and they would just quietly pin it on the cross that was there. But these people are proud of their sins, and they want to display all that. The dignity of LGBT plus people can be recognized with respect and sensitivity, even in those places where it's still a crime to make oneself visible to affirm one's orientation. Well, it is global rebellion against God. And that is the reality, regardless of what the civil laws say.
Yeah, they want to pretend that it's a crime to be homosexual while they have parades in the streets about it. Yeah. It's ridiculous, the fake persecution that they are implying so that they can get access to children.
Mm-hmm. Well, just take a look at this in Germany. This is Leipzig, Germany. You have a Christian cafe in Germany had to close down because of continuous attacks by left-wing extremists who were LGBT. They hated this cafe that was run by a church that was there. The Protestant Zeal Church had to permanently close its cafe after 26 attacks by leftist terrorists over the course of about 3 years. Some of these involved broken windows. Some of them involved butyric acid injected through the keyholes and things like that. But they said that there were, in one particular attack, they counted 78 hammer blows. Talk about hate. The hate that is there, of course, we're supposed to believe that it is hateful for people to repeat what the Bible says in terms of God's plan for our lives. And, we don't earn our salvation by doing something or by not doing something. But God is, in a loving way, telling us how our best life can be lived. He sent Christ to die for our sins, so we're not going to save ourselves by our works or by our abstinence of certain things. Nevertheless, they always try to portray that as hate, not as love. And but the hate is certainly on their side. In the first attack in early 2025, the perps injected acid through the keyholes. In the second, on Christmas Eve, this last Christmas, they drilled a hole in the window and they poured at least 1.5 liters of butyric acid into the cafe. The police have not been able to identify a perp for any of these 26 attacks. It's almost like they're not interested. It's like the UK police are not interested, and the rape kings. The consequences of the 2 butyric acid attacks alone cost the congregation 35,000 euros. They said following the acid attacks, the cafe remained closed for a total of 3 months. We simply ran out of money. As a church, we're left with 150,000 euros in debt from the cafe. They said the attackers accused the church of homophobia because they don't perform weddings or blessings for same-sex couples. See, it's not enough that you tolerate even, but you from a civil standpoint, from a legal standpoint, they were never satisfied with tolerance. It's not like the church was saying, you need to arrest these people, you need to lock them up in jail, or you need to execute them because they're homosexuals. That was not anywhere suggested. Instead, though, they demand that you celebrate what they're doing. In a sense, it's very much like what the struggle sessions of the communists always did. It wasn't enough to not be a capitalist. You had to be anti-capitalist. It was not enough now to not be racist. You have to be anti-white. And so this is what these people are demanding. They said, we stand by our theology and our ethics, which support marriage between a man and a woman and the traditional family. But this cannot be tolerated by the people who are constantly saying that they're about love, right? Except they hate anybody who does not celebrate what they do. In May, shots were fired at a Catholic church, also in Germany, during Mass. Professing Christians, that is, those who regularly attend church services, are an absolute minority in Germany. So one of the people at that church said, politicians recognize this, and they should protect us as a minority. They're going to appeal to their minority status. You see, they have adopted the same kind of mentality, that if you are a minority, you are a victim. This is the church. They should be holding up the truth as a pillar. And the truth is that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. That is the basis of what the Christian principles that have founded this country. And that is going to be the basis, not to say that, well, we're going to rank people based on their minority status and we're going to protect them in a certain way based on that. That is not the path to getting this fixed. The path is to respecting people's freedom to disagree. It is appalling that a Christian institution is being shut down by this kind of hate, said LifeSite News. And then there's this, a homosexual couple who sued a mother who refused to abort her surrogate baby. It's kind of interesting. This is a homosexual couple in Canada. They hired a surrogate to have their baby. And then they had some tests that were run, and they thought there were some minor health defects. So they insisted that she abort the baby. She refused to do that. And so the baby was born, and they took the baby, and they have refused to pay her bills. And now they are suing her in addition. The plaintiffs are seeking $600,000 in the lawsuit. The homosexual couple claims the birth mother did not inform them of the baby's health, thus put the child at risk. The baby has a lower cleft lip. That's a very minor thing. When we were in China, and again, our daughter was, because of our age, We adopted a child that was classified as special needs. And there were a lot of the kids that were there that had a cleft palate or something like that. And in China, they didn't have the money to do anything about that. But, an American could come, and it's a pretty minor thing to fix, actually. And these people got very upset about that. They claim this caused them emotional distress. So they want $600,000 from her. She is a single mom who was basically renting out her body. And that's the problem with these arrangements. And that's the problem with these test tube babies, actually. The birth mother wanted a home birth, and she filed a small claims suit demanding the couple pay for it. She said, I'm a single mom. I have a daughter. You're basically suing me to take my house. And she said, I feel used. They didn't get the perfect child they wanted, and they just threw me away. And so she said, I feel sorry for the child, because at some point, the child is probably going to figure out that these guys don't want the child, not the perfect child. Surrogacy has become very commonplace in Canada as well as elsewhere. The children in this situation usually grow up deprived of either a mother or a father. And that is really a big deal, folks. When we look at what is happening around the world, especially in China, Christians are disappearing for worshiping a god other than she. This is from the UK Telegraph. This is not a Christian publication. And what they're pointing out is that, government thinks that it's God, and they certainly do. We've had, that is a hallmark of tyrants. They think that they should be God. They want to be omniscient. They want to know everything about our lives. They want to be omnipresent, constantly watching us, and omnipotent, totally powerful. And so this goes through the reports of people who have been getting knocks in the middle of the night. Usually that's when the religious police would come around from China. Actually, they're not religious police, but they would knock in the middle of the night and break in and kidnap one or more family members and then try to come up with some charges against them, when the issue was that they just didn't like the fact that they were Christians. And as I said before, this is why, when Trump praised China's Tiananmen Square crackdown right after it happened in 1990, he said that was exactly the right thing to do. It was a smart thing to do. Of course, he's also praised Duterte in the Philippines, who did extrajudicial killings as part of his war on drugs. He said to the police, he said, if you suspect that somebody's dealing drugs, you can just kill them. Well, now Duterte is facing criminal charges in the International Criminal Court. That won't happen to Trump or to any of the people who are doing this under Trump in America. But if justice were served, it would. So now we have a pagan king with the heart of a tyrant, just like the Chinese Communist Party. He approves of what they did. He thinks it was a smart thing to do. And we can expect more of that from him in America. And we can see that is already ramping up with both the data centers as well as we've got another killing with ICE that we didn't have time to get into today, but we'll talk about that tomorrow. It is constantly, we're seeing masked men, a federal police agency, and of course, the John Birch Society warned us of that 50, 60 years ago. So we do not want to have federal police. We want to keep the police local. Ideally, we want to have elected sheriffs, not bureaucratically appointed police chiefs and that type, who are unanswerable to the people. But the last thing in the world that we want is the federal government doing the policing, the federal government setting up a network of surveillance, which is really what they've done through corporations like Flock. We're going to talk more about that tomorrow, as well as the data centers. There's a lot of updated news about both of those. We'll cover that tomorrow. Thank you for joining us today. Have a good day. The Common Man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity, created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.